هذا البرنامج برعاية المنتدى السوري.
الخير، أنا أسماء وهبي أطل عليكم في نادي العرب. اشتعل العالم من بوابة غزة، وعندها بدأت تطرح أسئلة حول الأمن الإقليمي في الشرق الأوسط ومستقبل عملية السلام وإمكانية إحياء اتفاقية أوسلو. ضيفي في نادي العرب المبعوث الرئاسي الأمريكي للشرق الأوسط السفير جيمس جيفري. مساء الخير سعادة السفير، وأهلا وسهلا بك معنا في نادي العرب.
Glad to be on.
سعادة السفير، لنبدأ من الحدث في قطاع غزة. كيف تقيمون منذ قيام حركة حماس بعمليتها في غلاف غزة والرد الإسرائيلي التدميري عليها؟
This is an existential crisis for Israel, which is decided by declaring war. It's an existential crisis for Hamas too, because it wants to eliminate it. Secondly, it is of extreme importance to the entire Middle East, beginning with Lebanon, not only because you could all be dragged into the war, but because this will determine whether Iran's march through the region, which you have seen in Lebanon, you've seen in Syria, you've seen in Iraq, you've seen in Yemen, we've seen in Gaza, will continue or will be stopped. The Israelis want to disarm Hamas and remove it from power in Gaza. I think they have enough forces to do that. They will listen to international concerns about escalation and civilian casualties, but that will not stop their operations. They will continue going until Hamas has been destroyed. This is not Lebanon 2006. This is not Gaza 2014. This is not even Lebanon 1982, 1983. This is the big one.
لكن هل على أرض الواقع تستطيع إسرائيل بالفعل القضاء على حركة حماس؟
It's a different situation. You know what Hezbollah did to provoke Israel. They attacked a patrol, killed 4 Israelis, and captured several others. That led to the Israeli incursion. What happened on October 7th is like night and day to what happened in 2006. Secondly, with Hezbollah, you know the operation was like squeezing toothpaste out of a tube. Hezbollah pulled up north. Finally, Hezbollah is a lot stronger than Hamas. You didn't have hundreds of thousands of troops massed to take down Hezbollah in 2006. You have that now in Gaza. So yeah, militarily this can be done. It's a small area.
من يتحمل مسؤولية كل سفك الدماء الحادث في قطاع غزة منذ اندلاع الحرب؟
Actors that bear responsibility for, excluding Israel's battles since 2000, Lebanon, Gaza, the Intifada, about 1 million killed, 15 million displaced in Syria, Iraq, and Yemen. And that is primarily Iran with some help from Islamic terrorist groups, but Iran very much so. And of course, Iran was very much involved in supporting Hezbollah and Hamas against Israel. You wouldn't have a totally stable region without Iran. I regret every casualty Israeli or Gazan in this current fight.
برأيك سعادة السفير، هل كان قرار تنفيذ عملية طوفان الأقصى إيراني مع العلم أن إيران وحزب الله صرحوا كثيرا بأنه ما كان عندهم علم أبدا بساعة الصفر أو أي تفاصيل حول عملية طوفان الأقصى؟
I'm not sure. As you know, because you live in Lebanon, there's a very close relationship, historical, religious, between Hezbollah and Iran. We saw that in the major Hezbollah effort to help Iran out in Syria. Hamas is both a proxy of sorts of Iran, it is also a Palestinian movement. And, I've read, 1,000 pages on the Shaba Farms, but the idea that Hezbollah exists to liberate the last, 30 feet of Lebanon from Israel is ridiculous, and nobody in the whole world believes it. Hezbollah's problem with Israel has to do with Iran's problem with Israel, not Lebanon's problem with Israel, as you just did by signing a pretty lucrative gas deal with Israel. Iran didn't know the exact timing, but I'm sure Iran knew and helped train and prepare Hamas to do such an operation because it's in Iran's interest to do so. It placed Israel in an almost impossible position to accept for the first time a defeat much greater than I'm sure Hamas even thought, or act in a way that the international community would rise up and condemn it and tell it to stop, and it would have to stop, and Hamas would win. People didn't calculate that regardless of whether Washington tells Israel to stop or not, they will not stop. They may turn the internet back on, they may let more trucks in, but they're not going to stop this military offensive. It's not going to happen. Hezbollah can send 100,000 troops into Israel, and they'll fight them along with us. We'll help them, but it's not going to stop Israel in Gaza. They're going to destroy that organization like we destroyed the Islamic State. There will still be Hamas cells. They'll be armed. They'll be running around Gaza just like they ran around the West Bank, but they're not going to have the capabilities they did on the 7th of October. That, I think, is clear, and everybody in the region should understand that.
نفذت إسرائيل منذ بدء عملياتها العسكرية في قطاع غزة جرائم حرب، وهذا بإقرار المنظمات الدولية والأممية. ألا تشعر الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية بالحرج من دعمها اللامحدود للحكومة الإسرائيلية اليمينية التي تنفذ جرائم الحرب في قطاع غزة؟
America did extraordinary human rights violations and violated the laws of war in its successful fight against the Islamic State. The problem is in conducting combat operations, and I've been on the ground repeatedly in Syria, Iraq, and elsewhere, when you're conducting combat operations against a terrorist force that is not only embedded in the civilian population, but deliberately uses civilians, such as hospitals that are also underneath headquarters, deliberately violating, by the way, the rules of the law of war, you make it very difficult to avoid civilian casualties. I am absolutely convinced the last thing the Israelis want to do is to kill civilians. It doesn't help them in any way, it hurts them. But they want to take down Hamas. And the international assistance organizations, the UN and others, be it in looking at what we do in Washington and looking at what the Israelis do, have a very loose standard of international war crimes.
هذا البرنامج برعاية المنتدى السوري.
بعد أيام قليلة على بدء العملية العسكرية الإسرائيلية في قطاع غزة، مواقف كثيرة سمعناها من المجتمع الدولي بضرورة وقف هذه العملية العسكرية التي تحولت إلى إبادة جماعية للمدنيين في قطاع غزة. برأيك سعادة السفير، هل آن أوان إيقاف هذه العملية العسكرية أم أن الأمور لم تنضج بعد؟
Let's talk about Ukraine as an example. Did the international community tell Ukraine to stop fighting several days after Russia attacked it? No. It rather, in most cases, supported Ukraine to one or another degree, and still is. In fact, we're resisting calls for a ceasefire. This is a decision by Hamas to go to war with Israel. They took that decision. On the day they took that decision, there were 19,000 work passes for Gazans inside Israel as part of Israel's effort to try to relieve the terrible situation in Gaza. Hamas took that decision. Now Hamas is going to have to live with it. They can't say, okay, we waged war for a day, got a victory, and now international community, come and save us. That doesn't work when it's a real war. We knew that after 9/11. Nobody told us. And we went into Afghanistan and we took down both Al-Qaeda and we took down the Taliban. Same mission the Israelis have given themselves for Hamas.
هل صحيح أن إدارة الرئيس جو بايدن هي التي أوقفت العملية العسكرية الإسرائيلية على قطاع غزة أم أن صعوبة تنفيذ هذه العملية على أرض الواقع هي التي دفعت بإسرائيل إلى التراجع عن تنفيذها والاستعاضة عنها بعمليات محدودة في القطاع؟
Biden didn't say don't do a ground attack, because if you don't do a ground attack, how do you destroy Hamas? It's not possible. I think he did say do it exactly as you're seeing now, incrementally, step by step. That has two advantages. First of all, it gives the civilian population more time to take serious what the Israelis said. Don't be north of Wadi Gaza. Now, the Israelis didn't say, we won't bomb south of Wadi Gaza. What they did say is, we're not going to send tens of thousands of troops in who are going to shoot at anything that moves south of Wadi Gaza, which is what they're doing now.
إلى أي حد صحيح أن الإدارة الأمريكية تولي أهمية كبيرة للغاية لملف الرهائن الأمريكيين الموجودين لدى حركة حماس؟ وطبعا كلنا بنعرف أنه يفصلنا عام واحد فقط عن الانتخابات الرئاسية الأمريكية، وبالتالي تحرير هؤلاء الرهائن بأسرع وقت ممكن سوف يسجل كنقطة إيجابية لصالح إدارة الرئيس بايدن.
That's a very good question. I talk to administration people, others do. I read their statements. I see what they do. It's very hard to, and it's very important. It's very hard to say what the priority of the United States is. Is it to support Israel 100%? Is it to get the hostages back out? Is it to avoid regional escalation? It's all of the above, but I don't know how we prioritize them, because let me say a word you never hear in talking about diplomacy in general, or this conflict in particular. These things contradict each other. You can't have ice cream and pie and cake and sherbet and everything with one meal. You have to decide which gets priority, and we don't know what the American priority is. The important thing is we're not deciding. Israel will make that decision, and it looks like they're making the decision for a military operation, as they keep telling us. The United States may not like that situation. President Biden will abandon Israel. Forget it. It's not going to happen.
ما هو الثمن الذي يجب أن تقبضه إسرائيل لوقف العملية العسكرية في غزة؟
That's a good question, because we faced the same question with the Islamic State. There's still 15,000 of them running around Syria and Iraq, and in the Assad areas of Syria, they're actually fairly powerful. And we launch attacks into those areas all of the time, as well as keep troops in northeast Syria and in Iraq to help local forces cope with them. That is, we have defeated the Islamic State, similarly to Hamas's ability to attack and overrun a fair chunk of Israel. But it hasn't been eliminated, and therefore we are still in an operation against them.
هل تستطيع إسرائيل الصمود طويلا في هذه الحرب، خصوصا أنه بلشت تعلو الأصوات المنددة بالعملية العسكرية التي يذهب ضحيتها النساء والأطفال بالآلاف، يعني بالآلاف. فاليوم هل تستطيع إسرائيل الصمود طويلا أمام هذا السيل من الانتقادات من المجتمع الدولي؟ يعني هذا من ناحية، وأيضا من ناحية أخرى تراجع شعبية رئيس الحكومة بنيامين نتنياهو في الداخل الإسرائيلي الذي يتعرض منذ بدء العملية لانتقادات لاذعة من الإسرائيليين.
How much international pressure did it take to get Russia and Assad to stop the barrel bombing, the double tapping, the chemical weapons attacks that wound up killing 650,000 Arabs in Syria? What's the answer? Women and children were dying deliberately in Syria in far larger numbers. We know what the UN says. Israel isn't trying to kill women and children. If every women and children, other than those in the hospitals, would leave that area north of Wadi Gaza, Israel would be killing almost no inadvertently by accident.
تطالب حركة حماس بتبييض السجون الإسرائيلية من الأسرى الفلسطينيين مقابل الإفراج عن الرهائن الموجودين لديها. يعني برأي حضرتك إلى أين تسير الأمور، وهل تستطيع إسرائيل تحمل هذا الثمن، خصوصا أن هناك ضغط كبير في الداخل الإسرائيلي وتحديدا من قبل عائلات الرهائن لإطلاق سراح يطالبون رئيس الحكومة بنيامين نتنياهو بالموافقة على مطالب حركة حماس من أجل استعادة أبنائهم.
That's an extremely sensitive issue, obviously, for any government. And it's a very important question for Israel. And I can't even suggest what they will do. It is very, very important to Israel to get those people back. But it is more important to Israel to destroy Hamas as an effective fighting force. So I think it is more likely that Israel would release all those Palestinians in return for getting the hostages back than it is for Israel to stop military operations and leave Gaza to get those hostages back. I think that is the dynamic. But again, Israel has to decide.
هذا البرنامج برعاية المنتدى السوري.
ما هو المشهد الذي سوف تتمخض عنه الحرب على صعيد عملية السلام الفلسطينية الإسرائيلية؟
Nobody knows. I believe that if Israel is successful, a success that would not be possible without this massive American support, there will be a great deal of pressure on the United States, including by our allies and partners in the region, to play a more active role. That will start with the settlement policy of this Israeli government.
ما هو مصير اتفاقية أوسلو سعادة السفير وحل الدولتين والمبادرة العربية التي أطلقت في بيروت عام 2002 وهي الأرض مقابل السلام؟
The deal was made in 2000 by Bill Clinton. Yasser Arafat decided he didn't like details in it and he turned it down. That led, along with some provocations by the Israelis, to the Intifada. That discouraged Israel. A, Arafat saying no. B, the Intifada. C, Israel withdrew from southern Lebanon, and as you know, in 2000, Gaza in 2005. And have they seen peace from Gaza, or have they seen peace from southern Lebanon? No. So that's the problem with Oslo.
هل صحيح أن واشنطن وتل أبيب تعملان على استبدال حركة حماس بحركة سياسية أو قوى في غزة تكون متحالفة معها؟ وإذا صح ذلك، من قد تكون هذه الحركة أو السلطة السياسية البديلة لحركة حماس في غزة؟ وهل هذا ممكن أصلاً؟
We'll try. The obvious candidate is the Palestinian Authority, not because it can do the job, but because nobody else can. Israel does not want to stay on in Gaza, and President Biden has made it clear he doesn't support an Israeli occupation. United Nations can't really go in and do this. International organizations, by their nature, are not very effective. They're particularly ineffective in violent situations, as we've seen from Haiti to Sudan. And think of the UNIFIL force in southern Lebanon right now. It probably will be the Palestinian Authority, but it will require tremendous international support, and it will require a deal. And I don't know how to put this together. We did it to some degree in Bosnia, where one of the problems with Gaza is you had a huge international assistance program because the people were very needy. But that assistance program, which was noble and heroic and very difficult and at times dangerous, also empowered Hamas. And the international community doing that, the UN and the other agencies, operated as if the whole Hamas-Israel thing was on another planet. It had nothing to do with them, but it had a great deal to do with them. And I think that the demand that Israel will make, not to stop the fighting, they may do that because they've succeeded, they may do that under international pressure, but to leave Gaza will be a mechanism in place that to ensure Hamas doesn't rearm, but I cannot see any other solution.
كيف ترون الموقف الإيراني منذ بدء الحرب؟ يعني إيران لم تتدخل في الصراع الدائر في غزة واكتفت بالتنديد بالعمليات العسكرية الإسرائيلية ضد المدنيين في قطاع غزة والدعم السياسي والمالي والعسكري لحركة حماس. كيف تقيمون الموقف الإيراني من الصراع الدائر في غزة؟
Well, Iran has done brilliantly over the last 20 years in expanding, as King Abdullah of Jordan called it, the Shia Arc in the Middle East by sending its surrogates, Iraqi Shia militias, Hezbollah, Hamas, Houthis, into battle with Iranian money, Iranian command and control, and Iranian weapons. It's been a great model because Iran avoids any pushback, but I wouldn't rule it out if Iran were to intervene, and I think Iran has to think about that. Iran will be happy to send the Houthis or send Hezbollah into action, but Iran itself will stay out of this war because it does not want a war right now. It has major domestic problems with its own population, and it would lose that war.
هل أجهضت الحرب الدائرة في غزة مساعي المحادثات العربية الإسرائيلية خصوصاً بعد الموقف السعودي الأخير؟
They've frozen it, and I would say that there was always a component of this, particularly with the Saudis, that Israel had to change its position on the Palestinians to advance relations with Saudi Arabia. That is still on the table. Israel has to take that decision. If Israel were to, for example, freeze settlements, engage better with the Palestinian Authority in a situation after Gaza, I think that the Saudis would be willing to continue. And the reason is everybody knows this is all to form a front against Iran. Nobody wants Hamas to win in Gaza.
إلى أين تتجه العلاقات في المنطقة؟ إلى مزيد من التوتر أم قد نذهب إلى التهدئة؟ يعني بكلمات أخرى سعادة السفير، ما هو مشهد ما بعد الحرب في غزة؟ هل قد يختلف عن المشهد الحالي؟
The Middle East sees waves. In the 1980s, 1 million people killed violently. You had the Soviet intervention in Afghanistan, you had the Iranian Revolution, you had the Iraq-Iran war, and of course you had the Lebanon war in its various configurations. From 1991 on, you saw a period of peace and great progress. The Iranians were governed by relatively moderate presidents, and you had the Oslo Accords, you had the Jordanian Accords, you had development in the region. And then, beginning in 2000, you've had another almost 25 years of terrible violence, and again, another 1 million people killed. It's up to the region and the people in it to decide what the next 25 years will look like. But much will depend on what happens in Gaza in the weeks ahead. If Hamas wins, Iran wins. If Iran wins, you will have another 25 years as bad as the last 25 years. That's my prediction.
إلى أي حد يمكن للحرب أن تتوسع خارج قطاع غزة؟ هناك خوف كبير من أن تتوسع هذه الحرب ويصل مداها إلى جنوب لبنان وأيضا الجولان.
Well, you're sitting in Beirut. I'm sure it's the biggest question every day. The Houthis, another Iranian surrogate, they all seem to have H names. The Houthis launched a barrage of cruise missiles and drones towards Israel. They were all intercepted by a U.S. ship. The American force currently in the Eastern Mediterranean will act to supplement and support Israel's air defenses against Hezbollah rockets and missiles, or Iranian rockets and missiles, or Syrian rockets and missiles. And if the fighting were to continue, they would intervene directly with airstrikes from those two carriers to ensure that Israel wins. That's the reality. I don't think it'll come to an escalation, but if it is an escalation, it's going to end only one way.
شكرا سعادة السفير المبعوث الرئاسي الأمريكي إلى الشرق الأوسط جيمس جيفري على وجودك معنا في نادي العرب.
Thank you very much.
يتجدد اللقاء الأسبوع المقبل في نادي العرب.
هذا البرنامج برعاية المنتدى السوري.